Wednesday. Decided to shift things up a little bit. Had a busy past couple weeks actually, but this episode really came to me as I was traveling back from France this past week or 2 weeks ago, I think. And the episode title that we're going to get into is Faith When It Hurts, Hope When It's Dark, and Love When It's Hard. The more that I really reflected on those three things, the more I realized that they are actually survival tools for men. They're what keeps a man from becoming bitter, from becoming cynical, reactive, hopeless, and even closed off at times when life doesn't go the way that we plan. So, the way I kind of simply look at this initially is that faith keeps you walking, hope gives you something to hold on to, and love reminds you that who you are becoming while you're walking. So it's interesting enough because that whole thing it reminds me. I'm a girl dad, so pardon the girl references, but there's a line in a Tinkerbell movie that my daughter had watched, and it really stuck with her. And it was like this time when Peter Pan was like, faith, trust, and pixie dust. Or I think it was actually Tinkerbell itself had said faith, trust, and pixie dust. And as ridiculous as that sounds, I chuckled back at the time, when we watched this movie, because she had always come up to me and be like, Faith, Dad, like, come on, Faith. And so, my wife and I would be trust and pixie dust. But there's actually something powerful there. And the more I really looked at it, I'm not saying pixie dust necessarily fixes anything. Well, faith, hope, and love, they aren't really soft words. They may sound like it, but the more you dig into it, they're really not. They're not just words that you hear in church or at a wedding or even on a coffee mug or like on a bumper sticker that like make life great. But these are actually words that become real when life punches you in the mouth. And it does. I mean, Mike Tyson talks about that. He said, we're all great. We all think that we're great until we get punched in the mouth. And then we get to figure out who's actually good, who's actually ready, who's strong, who's tough, who's ready to keep going. So the reason why I want to talk about this sort of now is I've seen a lot of guys over just in general people, right? This isn't a guy versus girl thing, but I tend to notice that there's guys that when they get into their 50s and 60s, it's like when a man loses his faith, he stops trying. Because then it's like, well, why? Why am I really even doing any of this? When a man loses hope, he starts to sink because then he thinks, well, it's not worth it anyway. I'm in this life. I'm just doing what I'm doing. I'm just waiting for death, basically. And then when a man loses love, he becomes really hard, bitter, and reactive. And honestly can be dangerous to the people that are closest to him because that softness, then you can turn into just a bitter old man. And we've all, I'm sure, known some bitter old man that we've had in our life that had aged and was just a prickly personality and it was just hard to be around. And maybe you did it because it was a family friend, or maybe you did it because he was family, but you just had looked at that and went, man, how did you get to here? How did you get to be so bitter, so negative, so just not pleasant at all? And so most men know these words, but they don't always know how to practice them when life gets painful. Again, everything's great on a bumper sticker, but let's look at the car after it goes through a car wreck. Is it still functioning? Is it still practicing all that, right? Do all those words still mean something to you? Or did all that just get thrown aside because now you're trying to firefight into the daily battle? So it's, these aren't really necessarily concepts for perfect conditions. Hopefully this reaches guys that are struggling right now. Because I know for me, there's been moments, and I'll share some stories, when I've had faith challenge, when I've had my hope challenge, when I've had love really get hard. And I was in that moment and I had to make that decision. How am I going to show up? Am I going to show up and just go down this path that feels like it's the only one? Or do I really start to force myself and challenge all my limiting beliefs and say, is there a different way? Because so many guys I'm running into are just full of disappointment, are tired, exhausted, uncertain. They feel misunderstood. They're waiting for something that hasn't even happened yet. Or they're dealing with people who just utterly frustrate them. And it's in those moments that we get to make that choice or get to make that different decision. So by the end of this episode, I want you to take a look into one area of your life and ask, where do I need to practice faith? Where do I maybe need to hold on to hope a little tighter? And where do I need to return back to love? And so, the triad that we talked about, um, let's dive into faith. And it's really faith when it hurts. Now, faith is not really pretending everything will work out exactly the way that you want it. Faith is choosing to keep walking with trust even when you do not control the outcome. And we practice faith all the time. Like we sit in a chair, like I'm sitting in this chair right now. I don't question whether or not this chair is just immediately going to break or fall apart or collapse or whatever else. Like, and I'd be on the ground. I have faith that this chair is going to hold me for this entire episode. And, we have faith that our car is going to start. We have faith that we can get to places on time. We have faith that we're going to get to places safely on time. Most times that happens. Sometimes it doesn't, but it doesn't prevent us from practicing that faith. So that's where I feel like we all practice faith every day. It's just where it's easy. Where it starts to get hard, that's when that faith is more important. Because the issue is not whether or not you have faith, because we already talked, like, I know you have faith. You have faith in everything that you do. The issue is, where is your faith pointed? And so, I want to share a little bit of kind of somewhat of what Amber and I are going through. Amber and I have been going through this fertility journey, and I think I highlighted that in a previous podcast. And it has tested my faith. It has tested her faith in ways that neither of us really expected. Because month after month, you hope that this is the month. You hope you've done all the right things. You've done all the right testings. Drank all the right drinks, right? You're stacking the deck. You're all healthy. But, everything is going really well. And then it doesn't work. So then you start doing the mental math. Then you imagine maybe what it could look like. And then you maybe start to believe a little bit less. And you start to say, well, maybe this isn't meant for us. And you have hope until all of a sudden it just falls, right? You get the phone call or you get the pregnancy test that says, sorry, you're not pregnant. Then you hit that crash again. Maybe this isn't meant for us. Maybe the faith, right? That moment of faith, that's when it gets real. See, because faith, kind of like what we talked about earlier, faith is easy when the outcome is trending in your direction. It is much, much harder when you keep showing up and the thing that you want still hasn't happened yet. So what do you do when the faith doesn't go your way? Right? You have to, the thing that's helped me is recognizing that faith isn't like a vending machine. We like to use it like that. We like to say, well, hey, I have faith that, my car is going to start this time, or I have faith that I'm going to get that promotion. And then if it works out, then you go, ha, ha, ha. See, that's why everybody needs faith. But it's not a vending machine where you put it in and you immediately get something back out. Honestly, I look more at faith as an anchor. Faith doesn't necessarily mean I get what I want. Faith really means I will not let disappointment turn me into something that I don't recognize. Because I can tell you, the positive, happy-go-lucky person that started the fertility journey, that had the eyes wide open, that was full of ambition, that was like, this is going to be great, adding a new kid into our family, like we're just going to this is going to be amazing. I can see a version of myself after multiple rounds, and this is probably our second fertility journey, because we had 18 months right after Lily was born that we tried to get pregnant again, and it wasn't working. And so 18 months we had to deal with that. And at the end of 18 months, I could see a version of myself that was that bitter, that was just like, what does faith even mean? Like I almost wanted to throat punch anybody that would even tell me about faith. You just got to have the faith. You just got to keep moving. You just got to keep hoping for it. And it's like, you don't understand. At 18 months in, you've been beat down. You just feel utterly awful because there's nothing that you can go do. Every handle, every solution, everything that you've been able to go do, every research deep dive, every blood test, every diet, everything that you've been able to go do doesn't, if it's still not getting you the result that you want, which is, I was using it as a vending machine, then it can turn you into that bitter person. It can turn you into somebody who just is not, is a very dark version of yourself. And I've noticed I've been on the cusp many times to be a lot darker of a person. And every time I'm always reminded some way, somehow, right? That's, you kind of have faith is like meta, like faith within the faith. But somehow there's always been somebody that's talked to me in the right way. There's always been the right person. There's always been a right intervention with whether it's people, places, things, spiritual, that has turned me back into that more optimistic, yes, let's have the faith. Let's figure this out. We'll continue to keep going. Just like Edison, I've tried to make a light bulb however many times, 10,000 times or 1,000 times, and it just hasn't happened yet. And yet he still endured and he still overcame it. So, I then start looking at that faith means continuing to show up with integrity, which is that soft version of yourself. And I don't mean soft like, you just got to be soft and mushy. Soft from the standpoint that you're open and willing to continue to keep trying and not just shutting off and go, well, that's why I just don't do that. Like we all have known somebody, maybe we've been there ourselves. We're like, oh, see, that's why I don't do any of these diets. I just, you know what, my weight is just whatever it's going to be because no matter what I do, it doesn't work for me. I just can't shed it. Well, that to me is like that hardening, right? You're less open to new things. You're less open to continue to keep trying for the things. You've settled and recognized, you know what, this is just no longer good for me. And so a lot of times, in that moment, we use our confirmation bias because then we say, well, this is just who I am, but that's not how you've always been. There has been a version of you that was more open, willing, loving, faithful, hopeful. And that is really your integrity, living in those alignments. But as you've gone down a treacherous path, and I'm not saying life is easy, life definitely is not easy. But if you allow yourself to become your surroundings, which is your disappointments and your failures and your things that it didn't go your way, then you're actually acting out of integrity. And I know that's a bitter pill to swallow. And I know that I've had to do this myself. I'm not necessarily, this isn't just like, me that has never endured this, speaking out. This is me speaking to myself so that at some point in the future, I can reference this because this is something that never goes away. You will always be tested, right? Your faith will always be tested. Your hope will always be tested and your love will always be tested. So what I aim with this episode is that you get some nuggets from this to be able to go back to hold the faith, to keep being hopeful and to love even when it's hard, right? That's really the whole piece of this episode because I recognize that life can get very, very difficult. And so also, right, if I tie back, faith means staying open when pain tempts you to just close off, that bitterness, hardness versus a softness and openness. And then, lastly, faith means choosing not to let disappointment become your identity, which I said earlier, which is don't let yourself become your surroundings, the disappointments around you. It's not meant as that. Your faith is an anchor. Doesn't mean that the anchor may not get drug a little bit and move a little bit, but it's something to bring you back home. But faith alone can feel heavy when the waiting gets really, really long. And so that's where hope comes in. So the next piece of this is hope when it's dark. And hope is not this wishful thinking. Hope is this rope that you hold on to when you're in the pit. Hope is not denial. Some people are like, oh, he's just like hopeful. He's just hopeful thinking over there. He's just like, oh, he's in denial. One day he'll realize what the world really is. Hope is not pretending that everything is fine, even though you're dying inside. Hope isn't passive, although we like to think that it is sometimes. Hope is this belief that something meaningful can still happen, even when the current evidence of everything of what you have in front of you is painful. Hope keeps a man from quitting too early. That time when you're just, you're working through a plateau and, it might be a PR running or it might be, a work project and you've tried and, it's one step forward and two steps back and you're constantly struggling. Hope is what's keeping you from from dropping the ball and just saying, I'm done. Hope gives you that direction. So hope as a rope is an interesting thing. When you're in a dark place, you may not be able to see the way out yet, but If you can grab that rope that's always there, you have something to hold on to. And sometimes that is enough for the next breath, for the next step, for the next conversation, for the next day. Sometimes hope doesn't immediately pull you out. Like there's been times where you just I know, personally, I've been hopeful, and I just am holding onto that rope just day in and day out saying one day this is going to get better. One day this is going to be better. I, I remember um I remember as a kid we fell on some hard times, and I was young. Not necessarily I didn't like when you're a kid and you go through really financially hard times, it affects you because you notice how it affects the people who are responsible. I didn't have any responsibilities when I was a kid. Obviously, right? When you think of running the household and making money and everything, this was probably, I don't know, 10-ish years old. So it's not like, oh, I could have worked, but I didn't. It legitimately just, I couldn't work. I could help around the house. I could help do things, but the whole financial piece of it just wasn't really a thing. And I remember, because we ate, we ate TV dinners, we ate whatever we had to in order to go survive. My parents were very resilient and they kept going. And I just always remember that time because I knew that my mom and dad were being tortured because we were in these really hard financial times. I didn't really understand finance like what it is now. I have a better appreciation going back. But at that time as a kid, you don't really know. So you're just in there recognizing and seeing, well, okay, well, mom and dad look really stressed, and now my sister's looking stressed. So then I guess I need to be stressed because there's something that I'm not really understanding. But in that moment, right, hope every single day, it was like, no, like we're going to get out of this. We're going to figure this thing out. And, mom had always said that back then, we're going to figure this out some way, somehow we're going to figure this out. And it, it reminds me now that hope doesn't have to have this grand vision. Hope is simply keeps you from sinking deeper, keeping you from letting the negative thoughts that are torturing you take you down to a deep, dark rabbit hole that you may not ever recover from. Sometimes hope is just enough strength to get through that day today. And hope dies last because once hope is gone, a man begins to give up on himself. He gives himself over to bitterness, numbness, and despair. I know I've been in those instances where I've been more bitter and I've had to remind myself, this isn't who I am. I'm living out of integrity with myself. There has definitely been times where I've numbed different substances, different addictions, different, ways of numbing. We all know what those are. Been there, done that. Again, not who I am, not who you are. There's something, right, that's missing, and that thing that's missing is that hope. And we've all been in the moments of being in despair. So hope does not always pull you out immediately. Sometimes hope is just this, rope that we hold on to. It's interesting because, faith says I'll keep walking, but hope says there is still something worth walking towards. And I think that's a very important distinction because we sometimes miscalculate or misunderstand or blur the lines with faith and hope, and we go, well, they're kind of the same thing. But it really is. Faith is I'm going to continue to keep walking, but hope says there's still something to hold on to. There's still something at the end of this line, that rope that's holding you on to, right? That rope is holding to you, but the other end of that rope, I always envision, is that it's held to the thing that you ultimately want. So as long as you're holding onto that rope, you know that ropes in general have two ends. It goes to the other end of the thing that you are ultimately trying to go after. So that's why you need to continue to keep walking with faith and hope to hold on to that rope so that you don't stray off course. And so, when I tie this back to like the fertility journey, hope is still believing that there's good ahead. That no matter how many disappointments that we have, that there's still a scenario in here that we end up getting pregnant and expanding our family, the ultimate goal that we wanted to have. Now, hope doesn't erase the pain of disappointment. I'm not going to lie to you and say, well, it's made every single month that we've been disappointed so much easier. It hasn't. I'd lie to you if I said it did. But hope refuses to let the disappointment become the end of the story. Like you may be disappointed, but at the very end of the disappointment that you're feeling is, you have a decision to make. Is that going to be a comma or is it going to be a period? Because if you let the disappointment be a period, then you've turned yourself over to bitterness. Then you've turned yourself over to numbness, despair, and out of integrity from the man that you were meant to be. Now, if you put a comma, then that allows you to pick up that rope again and say, you know what? I am disappointed. I am frustrated. I am angry. I am like, this isn't fair. All those emotions are valid. But if you have a comma, it allows you to say, but I'm still going to keep walking in faith. I'm going to continue to keep walking. And the hope, that rope that I'm holding on to, I'm still going to get to a destination. And it might end up where you just say, we're the amount of pain and the amount of sacrifice that we have gone down just is no longer worth it. We've come to the point where we're just exhausted and we need to take a break. And we did that back when we were going through the fertility journey. And it was 18 months, 18 months, and we had a miscarriage. And it was just like, you know what? We're not giving up on hope. We're going to continue to keep walking. We're just going to change trajectory. We're going to focus inward on ourselves. We're not going to allow ourselves to become bitter, and we're going to realize that maybe there's bigger things at play that we don't know yet. And that still is ongoing in the back of Amber and I's minds today. If it truly doesn't work out, then you always have that availability of going up a level and saying, there might be things that I just don't understand yet. There might be things that we might find out health-wise in either one of us that would be the real reason why maybe we can't do that. Or maybe it's we find that our gifts are meant for other purposes and, another child wasn't really in the cards for us. You just don't know. But if you give up on that faith and your hope, then your day in and day out life just kind of becomes null and bitter. And so, I want to then transition over to love, because if faith keeps you walking and hope gives you something to hold on to, love determines who you become in that process. And, love when it's hard, that main message that I want to get across is that love is not just something that you feel on your wedding day. Because we all know what love, like, if you ask guys, hey, you know what love is? They're like, well, yeah, on my wedding day, like I love my wife on that day. Love isn't just the one day that you get married. Love is something that you practice when you are tired, when you're disappointed, when you're irritated, you're misunderstood, or maybe you're dealing with just people that are way different than you, and it requires a lot of patience and love. So if you're a man of faith, then Scripture reminds us to do everything that we do in love. Even if that's not really your background, that still is powerful wisdom, because it's a reminder that everything that we do, we must do in love. And when you kind of go into love is patient, love is kind, that's just good recipe for how to live your life. Are you showing up with patience? Are you just snapping and arguing with people? Are you being kind? Or are you being a jerk? Are you even aware of the jerk that you might be? Right? Like these are all, talking points around this main message of love. And, when I think about it, most of the damage that we do is not because we don't know better. We do. We just, we turn off maybe some of that conscious thinking and we move out of emotion. And the way I look at that is that it's almost because we stop acting from a place of love. Like we know what love is on our wedding day. We know when the vows that we had said, like what they meant. And we know when the room is full and the pictures are being taken and everyone is celebrating, like that's easy, right? Your wedding day when, assuming there was no drama, but there's always some drama, but you kind of almost give all that stuff a pass, right? Because when you're in a room full of people that you love, that your spouse loves, and everyone's there to celebrate and just, so happy for you, like that's easy to see what love is. Now, love, when it gets hard, is when real life hits. The bills start stacking up. Kids start getting on your nerves. The stress, maybe from work or from the kids or from the household starting to fall apart. Things that are breaking, a storm that took out some trees that you have to go fix. Maybe it's the schedules that starts to build up and there's more things to do in a day than you have time for. And so now you're struggling on trying to keep it all together. Maybe it's the exhaustion because you've been doing all those things constantly and now it's been a month and you just don't feel like you're running out of gas. Week 1, you're like, I got this. I can overcome this. I can crush it. And then week 2, and then you start sacrificing sleep and you maybe use nutrition. And before you know it, you're just utterly exhausted and you just can't do it anymore. So now you're acting out of a place of from love and bitterness. When you just get a ton of disappointment, we've all had, I'm sure you've had those days where it's just disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And it's just like, you know what? Today would have been better just staying in bed because the amount of disappointments that you've had to live is just not helping. Could be miscommunication, could be just waiting. We live in such a time now where waiting is really a painful thing. Whereas before that was just part of the job, but when you have internet, you have instant messaging, you have cell phones that can connect all around the globe, waiting for anything right now can also be, a source of frustration because you're like, but I've got all these schedules and I've got all these things to go do, but yet I'm waiting at the pharmacy for them to go get the drugs and there's 4 cars lined up. There's a million things I could be doing in this moment. And right now I'm just wasting my time waiting for it to be my turn so I can collect the pills and then go home. And that's not right. That's always opportunities in life to say, is this out of love? Is this patience? Is this kindness, or is this not? So, love is also not rude. Like I've seen a lot of guys are like, oh, I'm a loving person. Then I see him being rude to a waiter. And I'm like, like, that's not love. That's you're lying to yourself if you think that that's true. Love doesn't keep score. I know a lot of guys, I talk to, and they're like, "Well, yeah, when my wife does this, this, and this, and then I do this and this and this, like, hey, we have a loving marriage." And it's like that's conditional. Like when we keep score, that's conditional love, not unconditional love. Unconditional love is no matter what you do, I will still love you. I will still be patient with you. I will still be kind with you. I will still, act from that place, not, well, if you do this, then I'll give you the patience, then I'll give you the kindness. Love does not lose its mind over every little inconvenience. And I know there's been instances, I say little, but there's been instances where you've had inconvenience after inconvenience and you just are at your wit's end. Love also doesn't have to be this big romantic gesture. When I talk about love to a bunch of guys, it's funny because you can immediately tell they're like, man, this is going to get some mushy stuff. And I go, am I patient with you when I talk? Am I kind to you? Then I'm showing love to you. Doesn't mean I have to kiss you. Doesn't mean I have to grope you. Doesn't mean I have to be all this mushy gushy stuff. Love is just being patient and being kind and having the humility to know and to reflect back when it's too much. Like when you're being too much of a jerk. Having that humility to know exactly, where and how you need to navigate that. Okay. So if you want to know where to start practicing love, don't overcomplicate it. Start where you're just impatient. Where are the areas that you just feel like you're losing your patience all the time? Could be with your kids. Like I said, we went through that list. Could be kids, could be communication, could be work, could be schedule, could be your partner, could be whatever it is. Start where you're being rude. Start where you're starting to lose your temper. Start where the people closest to you that always gets the worst version of you. And that's a really sad reality that I get reminded, right? Humble pie gets served daily. There's times where things will be really stressful and I'll bring that home and Amber reminds me, and she's like, are you being mad at me or are you just mad at the day and you're just taking it out on me? And a lot of times you don't even really know. So in that moment, it's like, oh, no, 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 I'm definitely not mad at you. Sorry that I'm not, treating you from a place of love, right? I'm not perfect in any of this, by the way. But the more that I start to see it, the more that you can become aware of it in all the different wrinkles and layers of life. And so this was, love is an interesting thing. So I got 2 cool stories. When I was flying back from Paris, there was a guy sitting on the plane next to me, and when we start the conversation, oh, are you going to Cincinnati? Yep, going to Cincinnati. Um, I said, you traveling for work or business? He's like, oh, for pleasure. And, we go through it. I say it's for work and everything. So we're just talking about traveling and just how, Paris, French, just all European. is just a very different lifestyle. And I said, it's so funny because it's not like what the news that you kind of read back home. And he said, "Oh my gosh," he's like, "I got a story for you." So he tells me this story because he travels a lot. He loves to travel. I think he grew up in um I think he grew up in India, I think. And so he and his wife was in a different country. So it's like they are definitely, they have a wide spread. It's not like mom and dad were born in Ohio. I was born in Ohio. Amber's born in Ohio. Like we're all Ohioans. Like they actually had people from different countries, and so they do a lot of travel, and that's just their culture. And so when his daughter was getting, of age where she could travel, like probably 16 or something like that, he's like, he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to Paris because meet up with some friends and whatever else." And she's like, "Oh no," she's like, "I don't want to go." He's like, "Why don't you want to go?" And she was like, "Well, because the French people hate Americans." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" So she goes through and just all this different stuff, right? Of all the things that she believed. They're rude, they're not helpful, they're this, they're that. And he's like, "Just do me one favor. Like you've got a lot of bias here. Just do me one favor. Let's just go on this trip. And if you experience France the same way, then you never have to go back to that country. Like I won't even ask you next time I go back. But if you experience a different one, just consider that maybe you're having a story that you're feeding the bias, and that might not be true." So she's like, "Fine." So she gets on, goes on the plane or whatever they go. Well, then when she was actually there, she experienced the people for herself, not necessarily the stories of people that she had heard secondhand because she's never been. And when she was there, she found out that the people were actually people. Some were kind and some are rude. Some were very helpful and some weren't, just like anywhere else. It wasn't all like the whole country, just like when people are like, "Oh, all Americans or whatever." It's like, well, no, America's a large country, by the way. So there's so many different sub demographics and demographics. Like there's not just one, it's not peanut butter spread here. But this is what happens when we let someone else's fear write the story for us. We stop seeing people as people. And when he told me that story, I chuckled because I said, well, I had a similar experience where, I backpacked throughout Europe for 30 days after undergrad. And, people, friends and family were like, "Oh, Europeans, this, that, or whatever." They had all their biases, even though half of them never even traveled there. And so when I went there and I really experienced the people and I really connected from folks, and this was just even, getting a sandwich on the street, talking to people. But it was like I really built really cool relationships with so many people, from, France and from, Italy and from Greece. And like it's so many really awesome people. And so it always reminds me, that's one of the things that always sticks with me is, hey, if you have negative connotations about somebody, you have stopped seeing the people as people. And it's only through that you can have a different perspective. And so the other cool story I wanted to share was, last night I was in France. I took an Uber drive into Paris because I wanted to get some pastries and stuff like that for the girls. And so I get in the Uber driver, and Uber drivers a lot of times they don't speak, either they don't speak any English, and at that point, then they usually don't really want to talk because we can't. It's a hard time communicating. But there's a lot of them that are trying to speak English. They have really broken English, but they want to try. So I always try to use that as an example to be a practicing guy for them. Just, hey, let's talk about kind of what with whatever. And I was talking to the Uber driver and find out that he's Iranian. Well, for context, right? This was back when we were saying, um, all the conflict is still very fresh, still very fresh. And in America, right, we hear and see everything in the news, but we really don't a lot of times know kind of what's going on boots on the ground, right? And so when he said, I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Oh, I'm from Iran." And I was like, "Well, what made you come to Paris?" And he's like, "I can't go back." And in my mind, I'm also thinking like, well, this is probably an interesting scenario because he knows I'm American, he's Iranian. I don't know if they are happy about what the conflict is going on. I don't know if they're angry about the conflict that's going on, but at this point, right, you're kind of face to face with reality, which is this is the geopolitical scenario that we're at, and I'm sitting face to face with it. He's like, I can't go back, and I go, I'm just politely probing a little bit to just see, well, what's going on. And immediately he just turns and he goes, what do you think about Trump and what he's doing in the world right now? And I was like, ooh, like this is hitting really hard, really fast. Because in the moment, right, I don't know, is he for what Trump is doing? Is he not against, is he against what Trump is doing? I don't really have, like, I struggle to have an opinion because I don't know really what's going on, like what living conditions is like. I hear a bunch of different things, but I don't have that personal reference. And I go, and my answer was, you know what? I said, it's very hard for us because there's so much noise. I said, I don't really quite know what to think. I said, you tell me since you're a lot closer to this, like you tell me what is like what's going on. And he immediately was like, I love Trump. He's like, I like the Iranian people are so happy that he's doing what he needs to go do. He's like, because the regime over there has just destroyed any freedoms. He's like, we can't practice, religious freedoms. We can't practice. He's like, my one family member had said the wrong thing to somebody, and not even like in an aggressive way, but just, had practiced something and they immediately killed him. And he's like, this is the world where like there are no freedoms. You're just set from an economic standpoint. You're always capped. You don't have the freedom to go do and say anything. Like all the freedoms that we enjoy in America are definitely not true over there. So he's like, so I was a refugee. I had to leave. And he's like, and I'll never go back because I, I still connect with family that's over there. He said, but it's not a great place. And I was like, whoa, like totally was not expecting this in an Uber driver, um, driving into Paris. But again, what it taught me was so much right now that everything's being polarized and we don't really know what to trust and not to trust. And he had even said, he's like, yeah, he's like, we see, he's like, I tune into different news networks around the world, and he's like, and there's so many of these different campaigns. He's like, but no, he's like, we're actually more frustrated with Trump because he stopped and didn't completely finish the job. And I was like, whoa, like that's just interesting. It's an interesting piece of advice, right? You can come at me for however you want to come at me, but all I'm doing is just sharing a conversation that was with a Paris, with an Uber driver. But it just was a very interesting perspective because the people are not the headlines that we read. The people that we that are living in these different parts of the world that are having struggles, they're not part of, they're not the algorithms. People are just people are not just the country that they come from. They have the accent that they have or the label that someone else puts on them, but they're still people. And it was just a wonderful conversation because we then kind of got into, what it's like, how has he liked in France? Does he want to go anywhere else? And like, what are his hobbies? And I just really got to know the guy, and he was just a really, really cool dude, and was open and shared a whole bunch of stuff. So it's again, you cannot love people when you have already decided who they are. And to me, that's right. We've stopped treating people as people. So it's it's something that I'm always reminded every time I travel outside the U.S. I mean, and I say that, I mean, I'm reminded that when I'm in the U.S. You go down to Texas, and Texas is a different. We're all Americans, right, within the country, but Texans are very different than Ohioans, and that's very different than Florida. Folks in Florida, very different people than out west or California. We all have different differences, but it's the people, right? It's not just necessarily like there's a whole wide range of people down in Texas, and there's a whole wide range of people in Ohio, but people are people, and you get to is when you realize that you have biases about people at a high level, whether it's race or religion or ethnic or whatever that it is, that and you stop treating them as people, then that's where the love starts to die, right? Um, so that's true within your spouse too. When you start to realize that maybe your spouse is just getting on your last nerve and it's just this thing, and you now are realizing that you're treating your spouse as a nag or as a like this is just an annoyance as instead of a person who has feelings that might be just trying to get you to understand their point of view. You get to open that back up with love. Like, are you going to choose to go down the bitter path? Or are you going to choose to soften up and go down the warmth path? So the last thing, because I know we're already at 40 minutes now. I've heard things before. Well, I've tried faith, but I keep getting disappointed. Faith is not proven by never being disappointed. Faith, you will be disappointed with and without faith. Faith is formed in how you respond after the disappointment. Do you continue to keep walking towards a thing, or do you just use the slightest disappointment as, see, this is why, I suck, this sucks, I am never doing this ever again. And that's faith is allowing you to continue to keep going down that path. Some people have told me, well, I don't want to hope again because I don't want to get crushed. Like, I hear this a lot from guys that go out and like they'll be really into this girl, and then all of a sudden the relationship will end. And he's like, well, I don't want to go back out there, and I don't want to put be vulnerable and get crushed again, because what if it doesn't work out again? Hope does make you vulnerable, but hopelessness does not protect you. You think that it does, but it really doesn't. It just makes sure that you suffer before the outcome even arrives. So, for that guy that's trying to go back out in the dating world, if he's just completely turned himself off, well, then he's suffering by never actually experiencing a loving relationship. Versus scenario B, which is, I'm going to continue to keep having hope that there is a relationship at the end of this rope that I'm holding on to, that there is a girl out there that will just, you two will be best friends and and have a wonderful, cherished life. If you don't continue to hold on to that hope and find and continue to keep showing up and try to find her, then you've essentially suffered before the outcome ever even arrives. I've heard people say love is hard because people are frustrating. Well, love is not tested by how you treat easy people, because if it was, then right, we wouldn't be having this podcast, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Love is ultimately tested by how well you respond when you are tired, triggered, inconvenienced, or dealing with somebody that you just don't understand. One of the biggest things I know is when you're in a time crunch, talking to somebody who doesn't speak the same language. Like, that immediately sends so many people through a frustrated state. But that's a really good test, because in that instance, like, that's when love is being challenged the most. Last thing I know I've heard is, but I need boundaries. Well, yeah, you do. Love without boundaries becomes enabling, because you're just enabling maybe bad behavior, but boundaries without love becomes walls. So, yes, you need boundaries, but you also need love. Like, those two they are different, but they're both needed. A mature man learns how to carry both the boundaries and love. How do I love with boundaries? How do I set the appropriate boundaries in love? And what was love? It's patience and it's kindness. So it's kindly, this is a boundary. This is what I'm not going to go do. I'm not going to allow you to walk all over me. This is a hard line. And if you do, well, then that's fine. But I'm politely, these are the consequences that goes along with it. Not, if you do this, you're out of my life forever. Well, that's a bit excessive, right? That's not coming from a place of patience and kindness. That's just coming from a very aggressive type nature. So I want to wrap this up with a couple practical steps. Right now, where is it that you might be struggling? In all different things. It's, where am I struggling in trust right now? So am I still showing up with integrity, or has disappointment started to change my character? What hope or what rope am I holding on to right now? Hope is a rope. Have I confused protecting myself with giving up? Maybe it's love. Where am I being impatient? Where am I being unkind and rude and judgmental? What would it look like to bring love into that exact place this week? You don't have to try to fix everything all at once, but you do have to try to take one step towards that. Okay. So those are three different things that you can do in each of those areas. So, faith, hope, and love are not soft. They are not weak. They are not just nice words. That is actually a triad that holds a man together when life gets heavy. Okay. So this week, look at one of the areas of your life where you need to practice either faith, hope, or love, Don't try to overburden and do all three. Just choose one. And if something came up for you while listening, send me a message with the word triad. Like, I'd love to hear what stood out to you. If this if this episode really resonated and you got value, please leave a comment, a review on podcast wherever you're listening to it. Until next time, then just keep moving forward, and I hope to connect with you soon. Cheers.